Hello everybody, I'm recording this live and I've screwed it up twice, so I've had to start again. This is the Martin Howard Property Podcast, the YouTube channel, the UK Property Investment YouTube channel, and my live TikTok channel. I've seen this happen quite a lot. HMO rules and regulations are getting broken, and as landlords we can become criminally liable if we screw this up. So we need to be educated on this subject. This is the question. My friend found a tenant for her 3-bedroom house. They're all 5 colleagues and work for the NHS. It's not a HMO. And she's putting the whole unit under one contract and wants to add just 2 tenants to name who will be responsible for the rent. I'm not sure if other tenants' names should be there or not on the contract. What if we add other tenants' name, then in future one leaves and we keep changing the contract? What are your guys' advice? Stop. You know it's not a HMO. You are criminally liable if someone gets hurt in that building and you've rented it out knowingly to more than 2 people from different family groups. You cannot do that. You are going to make yourself... Fire regulations on these buildings are massive. If you have a tenant that cannot escape because you don't have thumb turn locks on the inside and that person gets harmed in a fire, you are going to prison. It's not a fine. It's not a whoopsie, never mind, slap on the wrist. It's prison time. It's criminal liability. You cannot be renting houses out like that. So, yes, this is something to be passionate about, but you guys, if you are landlords and you are renting out properties like this without knowing the rules and regulations, you can be in real trouble. So, HMO rules and regulations, they differ across different jurisdictions a little bit. In England, they're a little bit different to Wales. Wales like to have their own things with their own names. So instead of stamp duty, they have land transaction tax. The same thing, its own name, because they did it by themselves. So HMOs must follow government rules and regulations, and it is your responsibility, as landlords, your responsibility to make sure that the house rules for tenants are followed. And these include, as with normal tenants, annual gas safety checks, annual electricity checks, adequate space for all tenants with no overcrowding. If you've got a HMO, you have to pat test things as well. Things like toasters and kettles and microwaves that you will leave for them in shared houses. You've got to ensure there are enough rubbish bins for all the occupants. Electrical update system check every 5 years. Up-to-date Legionella risk assessments. Working smoke alarms in every communal area, every bedroom, and a heat detector in the kitchen. Shared communal and facility areas in good repair, well, of course. So fire regs, if you're doing a shared house, if you're taking a house that isn't a shared house and making it into a shared house, you need fire doors on every bedroom door. If you're just renting it out to people without doing that and without licensing it, without having it checked, without having these fire regs in place, these fire checks in place, you can become, and you will become actually, criminally liable in the event of some incident. And HMOs your insurance won't pay out either. If you've insured a house as a buy-to-let and you've rented it out as an unlicensed and not done properly shared house, insurance ain't going to pay out either when something happens. So not only are you criminally liable, but your money's at risk. It's incredibly dangerous to be doing this. And as property investors, we invest in property because one of the things we can do is insure it, and so our assets are protected. Well, they're not protected if you do shit like that. They're just not. So, the rules for HMO room sizes are one thing to start with. At least 6.51 square meters per person if they're aged over 10, and it's less if they're under, but you're not going to be renting out a room in a shared house to somebody under the age of 10, are you? So, outside of bedrooms, you've got communal space requirements as well. If you have a kitchen/living area, then it's one unit of a certain size. If you have a kitchen and a separate living area, then you need to qualify for different size requirements. And occupied by 6 to 10 people, the kitchen must be minimum 10 square meters, and there must be an additional living room or dining room with a minimum of 16.5 square meters. There must be a kitchen, or there must be a kitchen with a maximum size of 19.5 square meters. If you've got a smaller one occupied by 1 to 5 people, the kitchen can be minimum 7 square meters. There must be an additional living room or dining room with a minimum size of 11 square meters, or a kitchen diner of 16.5 square meters combined. If you're just renting out a house without knowing your rules, you might not qualify. You can't just rent any house out as a shared house. It needs to have qualifications in place. We have regulations in place to protect people in this country. You cannot just do that. You may need to refit your whole house in order to make it so it is suitable for that. And by the way, tenants, if you have a landlord that isn't qualifying with the rules, you don't have to pay them. And as landlords, pay attention to that. There have been court cases where tenants have been told they don't have to pay because their landlord has broken a law or is renting illegally in some way. This happens. So if you think your landlord doesn't have a license, then you can look it up. HMOs are on a licensing thing in every council. You can check it. It is a legal requirement for landlords renting a private property as a HMO that has 3 or more unrelated people living in it. A landlord renting a property like this must have a HMO license and can apply for one from the local council. You can check that license. A landlord who doesn't obtain one when they should will be breaking the law, and councils can issue a fine up to £30,000 for each breach of the rules. £30,000 because you want to rent it to 5 nurses, this person. It's ridiculous. Don't do this. And it's not trying to stamp down on you for trying to make money. It is safety. You have unrelated adults living in a building. You need fire protections and other protections. You need locks on doors. You need all sorts. Self-closing doors. You need closers on your doors. You got them? Don't think so. Not unless you've been told to by your building control person because you are doing a conversion properly into a shared house. So I'll skip that, but there are so many rules on HMOs, and this person here who's trying to, and I'll read it again for people just joining. There are 5. My friend found a tenant for a 3-bed house. They have 5 colleagues and work for the NHS. It's not a HMO and she's putting under one contract and just wants to add 2 tenants' name who will be responsible for the rent, because if others move in and out, then she'll keep having to change contracts. Whoa, no, absolutely not. Every rule broken. You'll have £30,000 worth of fines as maximum, but really if something goes wrong, someone gets hurt, and if you're not in control of who's in that building, you don't know who's in that building. If you put somebody who has a criminal past in your building without licensing it properly, putting them together, and then that person then harms somebody else, I think you're criminally liable. You're certainly criminally liable as a result of a fire. But it doesn't matter how you do the tenancy agreement. If there are more than 2 adults from different families in the same building, it's a shared house, and you can adjust the contract and say you didn't know, it's a shared house, you're liable. It's a shared house, you are liable. And you need to make sure that you're following the regulations on HMOs completely and fully, like all the way, not messing about with this, completely and fully. Now, I had a link to Shelter's website on this somewhere, but I have missed. There it is. The government regulations. Licensing for houses in Wales. Now, England and Wales have the same rule set. Scotland slightly different, but it's basically the same. So licensing is mandatory. This is government documentation, mandatory for all HMOs which have 3 or more stories. Some of the areas you don't need licensing, but you still need it qualified. Most of this act came into force in Wales and on the 30th of June 2006. Well, how are there still tenants not knowing? You do need to fulfill all HMO regulations and compliance. There are some HMOs that aren't licensed because they have grandfather rights. There were HMOs before the rules changed, and therefore they have grandfathering. They take the rules with them. That doesn't mean you don't have to have the regulations passed. It doesn't mean you get to skip things. It doesn't mean you don't get to give people fire protections and soundproofings and everything else that you get. This is vital stuff. So I'm just skipping through a real long government document to just give people enforcement. It's a criminal offence to manage or control a property which should be licensed but is not. If convicted, it could be fined up to £20,000. It's still a 5-figure sum, isn't it? It's still a massive sum. Are there any controls on HMOs that do not need a license? Yes, all HMOs, including those which do not need a license, have to be managed according to the laws, setting out the responsibilities of both landlords and tenants. Managers of HMOs must ensure the good day-to-day management of the HMO. So we need things like notice boards with certain paperwork such as fire escape things, how to contact your agent, the electricity certificate that you need to do for everything, the gas certificate, all needs to be on the notice board in a communal area of a HMO. If you're just renting out a house as a shared house without these things, you're not compliant and you can be fined. And not just fined, you're criminally liable if something goes wrong, and that's prison time for trying to rent your house out. But these rules are there for a reason. They're there to help people. They're there to make sure that as landlords we're not unscrupulous, because I could take any house and just rent it out to as many people as possible by the room, but is that safe? Is that fair? Is that just? No. And that's why these regulations are in place. So when you have a house and you're thinking of making it into a shared house, then think of the costs involved as well as the profits, because the costs include changing all your locks, fired doors. You probably need fired door frames. You need linked fire alarm systems with a central panel. I mean, you're going to dig your walls out, you're going to dig your floors up, you're going to dig your carpets up. You need a certain level of electricity, and does your water supply have enough strength in it to serve as many people washing and using sinks at the same time as you'll need in a shared house? If everybody's having a shower at 7 in the morning, ready for work, have you got enough of a supply in? Is there enough pressure, or do you need a new one? In some of the houses we do in South Wales, the electricity supply isn't enough. You've only got, the big fuse before your circuit board, it's got a rating on it. If you're turning a house into a shared house, you might not have enough of a rating. You might need to dig up the road and put a new supply in. If you're doing a shared house without considering these things, imagine if you've got a house, it's a 3-bed house, you split the living room in half, give them the kitchen, so now you've got living room 1, living room 2, 3 bedrooms, and everybody's got a toaster and a kettle in their room and they all turn it on. That's 4,000 watts per room, 20,000 watts. A normal household electricity line isn't going to cope with that. You bang, pop your electrics. And of course, you're definitely not compliant. And at that point, when you're using that kind of draw from a line that's not designed to cope with it, you are presenting a fire risk. And if you present a fire risk and it causes a fire and someone gets hurt and you've done it like that, you are criminally liable. And you should be. That's fair. So when you are renting out a HM or a house and you're thinking about doing it as a shared house, there are costs involved. You need to cover those costs. You need to have your property licensed, regulated, checked by building control, pass fire checks, pass sound checks, pass council checks, have all the certificates, fire safety. In Wales, sprinklers. It's got to fit sprinklers if you're converting a property in Wales. Sprinklers. How are you going to do that? Where's the tank going to go? Does it need a tank, or have you got enough power from the mains? What are you going to do about communal area lights? I like to have them on movement sensors because otherwise people leave them on all the time. Is your heating system able to cope with that amount of usage? Oftentimes domestic boilers are not. You're going to need, and how much water are they going to use? We're talking expansion tanks, big tanks that people have. In ours, so I say a 7-bed one. We've recently done. We've had 2 monster tanks on the back of a monster boiler. It's a big plumbing system. It's not just rent the house out and hope for it. Mind you, that one did have all en suites. That's good. So, in answer to this person's question, no, you cannot rent your house out to 5 people. Even if you put 2 people on the tenancy agreement, you're still knowingly using that as a house of multiple occupation. If you get caught doing that, you'll get fined a significant amount, probably 20 or 30 grand. So the profits aren't there, are they? Plus, you need to make your property compliant, have it licensed if need be in your area, and you need to make damn sure that property is capable of housing that many people, in not just in terms of the securities, but also the capabilities of the water, electric, gas, boiler, and systems in the house to actually cope with that amount of people living in it. That's a little version of my podcast. We worked out a 14-minute one. Thanks for listening. I'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.